Hello and welcome into the Bird's Eye View podcast. We are here on Monday, May 13th, one day after Mother's Day. So happy Mother's Day to all the mothers out there. Today, we are going to get into the Toronto Blue Jays series against the Minnesota Twins, some of the bat tracking info that came out Sunday night, Vladimir Guerrero Jr.'s hot streak, and look ahead to the dooming series against the AL East-leading Baltimore Orioles. I'm Zach Worden, joined as always by Jori Negin-Shecter. And Jori, you were at the Rogers Center this weekend. How was it?
Yes, I got the one game that the Blue Jays did win, which was plenty of fun, of course. I mean, the new renovations, everything looks all spick and span. And I mean, the ballpark was great and the game was pretty good. Obviously, big comeback, but the two games on the other side, I mean, other than the dome opener, not a whole lot to really report as far as maybe good news, but we will get into that.
Yeah, they lose the series to the Twins, so they've now lost, I believe it's 5 of their last 6, and the one series that they didn't lose was a split to the Phillies 1-1 there. So how are you feeling? I mean, the Saturday game is obviously the win of the year. I think it's safe to say. You fall down 7-1. Kevin Gausman gets lit up by the Twins again. You got a former Blue Jays prospect on the mound, and they're able to kind of pull that one out and come away with the 10-8 win. But that is sandwiched by 2 games where it was the exact same story that it's been the entire year.
I think for a series that the Blue Jays ultimately lost, I think there's a lot more positives to pull. But with that said, this is kind of the same story that it's been basically the entire year, in that the pitching has pulled its weight, particularly the starting pitching. And the bullpen has blown leads late or has let close games slip away. And of course, the offense hasn't come to show. Now, I mean, again, we will get into all of this, but I think the biggest takeaways, of course, are probably the Saturday game in terms of what this lineup could be, what they have the potential to do, if you will. I mean, you saw basically all the big names in terms of the Schneiders, the Jansons, the guys that have been performing, even the Vlads who've been hot. He picks up 4 knocks. They did their part. And when they did their part, the Blue Jays offense strung together a number of hits, and they looked like a team with an offense capable of winning ball games. Now, of course, they proceeded to give up 8 runs that game, and a number of them tacked on to Kevin Gausman. Now, also, I think he got a little unlucky at times, but definitely that Saturday game, I think the offense showing the first life it's really shown, the first heartbeat it's shown in goodness knows how long. And then, of course, just very briefly for the Sunday game, Alek Manoah is back, is good again. Maybe. I mean, no earned runs is nice. Obviously, the 3-run shot is not so nice, but looked as close to Cy Young candidate Alek Manoah as he has in, we're talking years at this point, really.
Yeah, I mean, 1 walk, no earned runs. Of course, the error kind of costs him there in the 7th inning, but overall, I mean, like as positive as a step forward as you can ask for. I know last week we kind of talked about it after the Nationals game as like kind of debating whether he was even ready to be up at the major league level yet. And so I think it's really encouraging to see him at least settle in. And I mean, we saw him last year. He had good starts last year, right? So it's tough to really definitively say that he's back or not. But I do think that for him, if he's going to be a part of this rotation, that he's not only got to have starts like that one, but he's also got to find a middle ground as to where he's either okay and like is able to give you 6 innings of 3 earned runs or something like that, right? Like kind of in the middle where at least he eats some innings and gives the team a chance to win. And he didn't give the team a chance to win in his first time back, and put them in a great position to win on Sunday. And I think him rolling out there in the cornrows, the high socks. I mean, a new look Alek Manoah. I thought he looked like pretty good overall. I can't complain at all. So really encouraging there. I mean, going back to the Saturday game, which you were there for, I want to get your opinion on this because we saw George Springer go down with illness this weekend, and that led to Davis Schneider getting a pair of games in the leadoff spot. And if you are a analytically minded thinker or probably just a watcher of the Toronto Blue Jays this season, like you probably realize that George Springer is not the ideal leadoff guy for this team. So is it a coincidence that when they have, Schneider leading off and Danny Jansen kind of sliding up in the lineup that they put up 10 runs? And then the next day, George Springer comes back from his illness and they put up 1 run in that game. I mean, how do you feel about what we saw transpire this weekend as far as the leadoff spot goes with George Springer and Davis Schneider?
So there's a couple parts to this question because it doesn't take a genius to figure out that A, George Springer is not singularly at fault for the Blue Jays' lackluster offense as a whole, and B, George Springer has not been George Springer for quite some time now. So while I wouldn't necessarily, again, pin the results of the offense on Springer's inability to really get on from the leadoff spot, to me, it seems pretty evident that the time has come to give something else a try. Now, I don't even know if I want it to be Davis Schneider in that leadoff spot because he provides a decent amount of power. And I think you're kind of putting yourself in a position where, listen, a home run's a home run and you can only control the sequencing so much. But when you got a chance to keep a run producer in a run producing spot in the lineup, I'd maybe rather have Davis Schneider. And again, he also himself has become a full-time player at this point. I think he's played in each of the last at least dozen games. So I think having Schneider in the leadoff spot, probably not long-term his home, but definitely valuable, I think, to have someone other than Springer leading off for you, because realistically, given that your leadoff guy is going to be getting the majority of at-bats, it needs to be someone more productive than what George Springer has given you. And we've talked about this at length, but again, it bears reiterating that it's just clearly at this point, a change is necessary.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. I mean, I talked about this on the Jays pregame show on the radio the other day, but like David Schneider is kind of like your prototypical leadoff hitter, like in today's baseball, right? Like he gets on base a ton, he has some power, and it puts together really good at bats. And George Springer is definitively not that anymore. And even like I would even argue that like maybe he was never even really that much of a definitive leadoff hitter. Like he yeah had seasons where he got on base so much, but he was also hitting for a ton of power and had speed, whatever. But the thing about hitting leadoff is that it's not about the leadoff, right? Like it's not about him hitting first because he's probably only going to hit first once in the game, and that's in the first inning. And it's about who's getting the most at bats on the team. It's like I don't care. I mean, the first inning results have been very poor for the Blue Jays again this year, but like that's fine, I think. As long as you're scoring runs later in the game, right? And by having George Springer lead off, you're putting him in a position where he's coming up to the plate like 4 or 5 times in a game, whereas you're like 6, 7, 8 hitters, like they're coming up 3 or 4 times. And when Davis Schneider has been so much better than George Springer, like that one plate appearance can make it a difference in a game for sure. But over a, a span of a season, like that one plate appearance per game turns into like 100 plate appearances. And that's kind of where you're losing out on the margins where maybe George Springer like turns it around eventually, but I don't think that you can be afraid to slide him down while he's obviously not producing.
And the other thing too, I would mention just with regards to Schneider, right? Listen, like whether it's the one hole, whether it's the two hole, he's got to be a guy that you get a lot of ABs for because he's one of the only guys that is hitting. I mean, finally, you've got Vlad coming around. The power is still maybe not there, but he's really starting to string together some at bats, right? So listen, if maybe Vlad becomes your 2 hole guy, maybe you put Schneider in the 3 hole, like you have some machinations that you can still do, right? It's not like you're about to bolt in Schneider for the rest of the season in the one hole. It's not like you're about to bolt George Springer into the 7 hole, right? There's a lot more machinations you can make. And that's not to say that Schneider can't slow down and Springer can't heat up. But it's pretty clear at this point that your best hitters are not the guys that you are putting in the position that your best hitters should be in.
Yeah, I mean, like looking at it, like I just don't know. Like, there's got to be something behind the scenes, right? You got to figure that there's something behind the scenes as to where George Springer says, I want to be hitting leadoff. That's where I need to be, whatever, right? Like you feel like that's probably got to be the case because we're at the point now where it's the middle of May and George Springer has a 66 WRC plus, is reaching base less than 28% of the time, and only has 3 home runs after hitting two in the first 2 games of the year. So like there's got to be a change. And I mean, we, again, like you said, we've talked about it a bunch, and really it's just confusing to me as to why they are like so willing to move Bo around, but it's not the same for George.
Do you think it's almost a bit of a sunk cost fallacy where they've kind of got him locked into this team for such an extended period that if you do kind of rupture the chemistry with him, if you do upset him, he's not going anywhere and he's making a lot of money to be upset?
See, the thing to me is like he doesn't seem like that type of guy to me though. Like he seems like more of like a happy-go-lucky kind of guy who does want to help the team win. And I it's just weird. And I mean, without being in the clubhouse, like we can't have an answer as to like what would happen if they moved him from the leadoff spot. And they did it last year. I remember they did it kind of around the All-Star break. Like they put Whit Merrifield in the leadoff spot when he was super hot and moved Springer down. And Springer wasn't even struggling to the point that he is so far this year. So like you've done it before, and like what did something bad come out of that? Like who's to say really?
I I just don't know. Again, it's really kind of comes down to this lack of transparency almost with the lineup. And I think this is something that you don't expect transparency, right? But it's the process, it's the decision making that again starts to become a bit of an issue, starts to become a bit of a kind of a question mark for this team. Now, is it maybe just a case of they're waiting for the Davis Schneider regression and they just feel they don't have another adequate leadoff hitter? I mean, that seems like a possibility too, but I just don't see why there's so much reluctance to make changes.
Do you think that the leadoff career leadoff home runs thing plays into it at all? Like he's second, right? So he's second to Ricky Henderson and he has 57 and Ricky Henderson has 81.
Well, like
I,
he's not catching him.
I
He's not
don't
hitting
think he's
30.
catching him, right?
He's not hitting 30 more leadoff home runs, right? Like,
Yeah.
I mean, he's played in the league for he's got to be approaching 10 years at this point, if
Well,
not
he just got
already.
his like service time thing.
So and he's got 50, he hits 5 a year. Like he'd have to do something incredible and have to do it into his almost 40s for that record to be something that he was going to hunt down. And it's not really a record. Listen, people love the home runs record. People love the hits record. I mean, who cares about the leadoff home runs record?
Yeah, it's kind of funny just to kind of like think about like the leadoff home runs record, like he's chasing it down. He's chasing down Ricky Anderson in to go into Cooperstown. But it's funny because you know who actually is being chased down in this record? It is George Springer because Mookie Betts has 49 and is 8 behind him. So I would probably say Mookie Betts ends up with more career leadoff home runs than George Springer does.
That seems like a pretty likely scenario at this point. And I mean, as far as how much you really care about that, like I just don't. There's just it doesn't even rouse me.
Yeah, I'm like if it is playing something, like if it is playing a role into the decisions, then there needs to be some tough conversations had about what that really means and how that affects the 2024 Toronto Blue Jays.
And the other thing also I want to ask. So I mean, I talked a little bit about it. Is Davis Schneider your leadoff guy?
For me, I would have him in there, yeah. How about you?
Because
You do
because
you think Turner or Bo or Vlad or
th- there isn't
IKF?
Well, like this is where I kind of am like, there's not a good solution because, like I said it right off the top, I don't love Schneider there either because I think his power. Listen, like I get again that you can't control the sequencing, but something you can control is who comes up before your biggest power hitters. So I don't know if I'm really super interested in the idea of Isaiah Kiner-Falefa and Ernie Clement and Kevin Biggio, like those types, being the dudes that come up before Schneider. Because realistically, you're not going to be put in a position where he has guys on base to, and I hate to use the word, but do damage.
Yeah, I mean, I don't. It's tough because like if you want guys on base, then he's going to be like your top option, and if you just had like a run producer, like I mean, obviously Vladdy's coming around, Jansen's been really good, and behind them, like you feel okay about Justin Turner. I would say I don't think that I would love Justin Turner as the leadoff guy as kind of has been put out there. He puts together a good at bat and gets on base a ton, but I just think that like having kind of more of a threat at the top of the lineup to like do that damage is where David Schneider comes into play for me. And I mean, if I'm looking at it, I'm probably looking at it as I want David Schneider to have more at bats than less at bats. So that's what's kind of where I'm putting him at the
Yeah.
top of the lineup.
And I mean, who even knows how real Justin Turner is because we've seen him already slowing down. And we've also got some new information. This feels like as good a time as any to talk about Justin Turner's very strange habits. I'll let you kind of take the reins on this one because the
Yeah.
bat tracking information, of course, comes out over the weekend. And we learned that Giancarlo Stanton swings very hard and crushes baseballs, which we already knew. And we learned that Luis Arias is really good at putting the bat on the ball and swings very slowly. And then we learned some things about the Blue Jays. And I know that this is something that you have been kind of sitting on. So I kind of want to let you take the lead here.
I mean, yeah, it's interesting because like we we've been waiting for this bat tracking data and for them to drop it drop it kind of like the Sunday night before I think they had said that it was going to come out Monday. So we've had a little bit of time to play with it now, but it's super cool to like be able to see all the info. But as we talked about kind of before we hit record, it's like there's not a ton of like sweeping takeaways from the information. Like you can look at it and it's kind of like the same thing as like pitchers, right? Where it's like I think this is kind of from the Mike Petriello article where if having a 98 mile per hour fastball is nice to have and you'd rather have it than not have it, but it's not the end all be all of pitching, right? So same thing for hitters where yeah, you want to have a guy swinging the bat 80 miles per hour, but it's not going to be the end all be all because, like if it was the case, Giancarlo Stanton would be the best hitter in baseball, and he is decidedly not that. But like he probably has the highest max exit velo, and he's kind of always had that, right? I'd be curious to know if they had this like in 2016 when he was hitting 60 home runs, what his bat speed was at, and if it was like kind of similar to his now, or how it's actually even dropped.
Well, like that's kind of the fun thing to think about too is like, and again, sorry, we know it's a Blue Jays podcast. We're talking a little bit of not Blue Jays here. But like, could you imagine if like he was like 2, 3, 4 ticks and he's already like he's got some separation
Yeah.
on the second spot. Like Prime Stanton probably was swinging the bat almost as hard as maybe some guys that throw in their fastball.
Yeah, yeah, it's crazy. That's just insane what he does. And obviously, like you mentioned, the unicorns on the list, Luis Arias, Giancarlo Stanton, like Juan Soto to a certain extent is a unicorn on that list as far as like a guy who swings it hard and squares up the ball more often than anybody else who swings it hard. But I do think that there is a fourth unicorn on that list, and that is Justin Turner, who is fairly separated as far as a guy who swings it pretty slow and also like squares it up above average, but is kind of like in his own category there. He's like on the Luis Arias track, but like obviously he's not Luis Arias. And for him, I would be really curious to know like what he was doing in his prime years as well. But for him to be at this point, we've seen him struggle recently. And if you already look at kind of the month to month bat speed stuff, like it's already down 2 miles per hour. So I don't want to say like the cliff is coming because obviously he succeeded early on with this slower swing and making contact, but is it something that we're going to see drop even more going forward? And like is the cliff coming up sooner than we thought it might?
And also, like, for context, those 2 miles an hour, I mean, in terms of kind of range for this statistic, you're really only talking mid 60s to mid 70s. Like a 2 mile per hour drop is equivalent to 10 to 15 to 20% of
I mean,
basically the
like
range, right?
the science behind it, like 1 mile per hour of bat speed is approximately equal to 6 feet of distance in the air. So you lose two, you're dropping 12 feet, right? So what is a 370-foot home run becomes a 358-foot flyout. Like it's a significant difference, like for every 1 mile per hour. So if that keeps going down, like I don't think that we're gonna sit here and like we'll put up like yellow flags for now, but the red flag to me is like if it keeps going down over the course of the year, and that's definitely going to be like something worth monitoring and something very cool that we can do now based on this bat tracking info.
Exactly. Something else. Do you have it pulled up right now? Because I
I
want to
do,
ask
yeah.
you as well about this. So obviously we talked about Vladdy being a guy that looks really good there. There's another guy in the minor leagues that has some swing track info that maybe looks good. Just some thoughts on Addison Barger.
Yeah, guy swings it hard. I think we could all draw those. It's funny because all this bat tracking stuff, like you watch the hitters and it's like it just matches up to the eye test. Like you watch Addison Barger swing and you're like, wow, that guy swings really hard. And yeah, it's interesting to see for sure. I think he's a guy, again, like probably his 18 plate appearances weren't enough to really get a sense of who he is. And for a team that needs guys to do damage and hit for power, like obviously he's got it in there. So would I have liked to seen him get more of a shot? Yes, but we obviously are going to be waiting a little bit longer, and I don't know what else to really say about him at this point. Like it's really cool to see him like kind of in the Vlad range as far as like how quick he's moving the bat, and it kind of speaks to his power potential for sure. And I mean, I guess we kind of buried the lead a little bit on this, but the Toronto Blue Jays are last in Major League Baseball on average bat speed, which again, like not that shocking based on the way that they don't hit for power, but like it it's crazy because I imagine a few years ago they would have been top five ish in this stat compared to where they are at now, where they seem to have totally switched philosophies for their hitters.
I mean, we've talked about it at length, but in a shocking twist of events, the Cleveland Guardians managerial and front office staff has turned the Toronto Blue Jays into the Cleveland Guardians, and they're not hitting the ball hard. Like this is such a predictable outcome. And I don't want to use this as another excuse to bash the Blue Jays front office, right? Like we've done that. We did that, I think, last episode. I think we talked about rebuilding the team an episode or two ago. So like it's been a tough couple weeks. I'll say that much. But just again, that's something that I think clearly is going to be an issue moving forward, especially given that, again, you got guys like Turner, like Springer, who are heading in the wrong direction for that.
Yeah. I mean, like really quick, like we can just kind of run through like some of the standouts or like some of the interesting guys on this list, I think. Dalton Varsho, like kind of him being in the they obviously have it like shaded in red if you're in the higher half of the league and shaded in blue if you're in the lower half, and he's kind of got like a decent shade of red on his. And to me, like that's super encouraging as far as like there's more power in there. And we obviously see it when he does make contact, so his is probably just like a case of finding a way to make more contact. You see it when he's hot, right? Like he went on that super insane run where where he was like a top four player in the American League in F4 or whatever. But it kind of shows you like what type of player is in there and what he does well, and he moves the bat really well, and obviously plays defense really well. So you can at least understand what he can bring. Um, I think George Springer is pretty interesting because he is like one of the top five guys on the team. And I think the expectation had maybe been that his bat speed had completely fallen off a cliff, but it is okay. Like it's not great, but it is probably, and it's definitely not where he was in his prime. But again, like that's one where I think the eye test like doesn't quite line up with the result, where he's still moving it pretty well. Um, I think Danny Jansen and David Schneider being in the middle is pretty funny because like we know what they're trying to do at the plate, and it's not like
They're
swing
not trying to
swing.
mash. They're trying to
Yeah,
do one thing only, and that's
the
send balls into the Schneider portion left field.
the other way. Schneider's porch corner, right field line.
Is it
We
right field corner?
I think so.
Whichever portion is in the left
The
field
kids
corner.
playground. They're trying to hit it
The
to the
kids,
kids
they're trying to,
playground.
yeah. Excuse me. You know what? It was just in the ballpark. I had to know this stuff.
Yeah, other than that, I mean, I think everything lines up pretty well with what we see. So let's talk about Vlad a little bit. I mean, obviously like he's top of this list, but he has been on a insane, like I not an insane tear, because like you said, the power hasn't quite been there, but he has been hitting the ball hard and has hits in I believe it's like almost like 12 13 at this point or something like that.
No, he's definitely been dramatically better. I'm just pulling up his splits here. In the last 14 days, he's got a 992 OPS. In the last week, he's got an OPS over 1,000. So he's coming on at the right time in terms of just after his miserable April, he's showing signs of life. And like, this is kind of who he maybe is. Listen, like, if he's just not going to be a prodigious power hitter, it's not ideal, but like, I'll take 25 bombs out of him if he's hitting 300. Like it's a totally different
Yeah.
dynamic, right?
Yeah, I mean, like looking at it, like so I have it here. So it is 12 of his last 13 he has a hit. He is 21 he has 21 hits and 57 plate appearances. He's got a 184 WRC plus. He's hitting 400 with a 456 OBP. I mean, like yes, you would like to see his like insane exit velocity, like his average exit velo in those games has been 97.8. Um, like you'd like to see that turn into more doubles, because of those 21 hits, only four of them are for extra bases. And like whether it's just like him not getting to the optimal launch point to hit the ball over the wall or whatever it is. But I think beggars can't be choosers, right? And if he's putting up a 184 WRC plus and getting on base 45% of the time, like that is more than good enough for what you need from him.
The year he hit 400 in double A, that was in 2018. He hit 14 home runs in 60 games. So like a good, like that is some power, but he wasn't like light tower guy when he was a 400 hitter. So I had this thought, do you think he's kind of trying to work his way kind of back to, instead of trying to be like a power bat, maybe he's trying to turn himself into a really exceptional bat to ball guy?
I mean, aren't all the Toronto Blue Jays trying to turn themselves into exceptional bat to ball guys? Um, I would be curious to know like kind of what the average launch angle has been for him, because if it's him getting to contact right now and kind of being like, okay, I just want to hit the ball hard, and like I don't care what direction that the ball is going. I'm just gonna hit the ball hard and I'm gonna slowly work it up. And it would be like I don't mind that. Like if he's doing that, and then like if he's finding a way to slowly creep it up through that, it's really tough in baseball to like fix a lot of things at once. So if he's like, okay, I wasn't making ideal contact, so I'm gonna try and make better pitch decisions first, which he has generally done. Like the walk rate is better. You still see the pitch selection not be the greatest all the time. And I think actually the at bat the other day in the comeback win where he was like bases loaded, and in the past like you would see him try to do too much in that situation, right? Because he feels like he needs to be the guy or whatever, but where he just like lines a super hard hit single and drives into, like I think that was a really encouraging at bat for him. But if we see that like average launch angle slowly start to creep up over the next month or so while he's maintaining this quality of contact, I would be really encouraged that like he could be in for a massive like second half, like leading up to the All-Star break kind of end to the season.
Okay, crazy thought. Like the most insane thought I've ever had in my life.
Okay.
He's riding a 328 BABIP right now. And I'm sure it's way higher than that over his last however many games. What if he just went full Luis Arias, but hitting the ball hard? What if he just became the world's greatest singles hitter?
I mean,
And listen, like that's a horrific outcome for him, if we're being honest. But it's also a dramatic step up from where he was last season.
it's kind of funny because like obviously that's what his main tool is, right? Like putting the bat on the ball and hitting it hard. And in 2021, it was almost like, wow, that he's like figured out how to hit the ball in the air and combine that insane hit tool with his insane power potential. But maybe like that just is who he is, right? Like he's obviously a insane true hitter talent, like a 80 grade bat to ball guy. And maybe that is what like maybe that is who it is, and the what you can get from him in season is like the best possible version of Luis Arias. Like I'm probably not complaining about that if
No.
I'm
And like listen, like Luis Arias, a lot of his issues are in that he's like, I hate that I'm going down this path, like a not great defensive guy that's like a fringy kind of first baseman type. I mean, prodigious bat to ball skills. Is this just where it's headed? And like, listen, like Vlad's doing better than he was last year. He's got a 122 WRC plus right now. It was a 118 last year. If you can get up to that 130 range and hit, but he hit 32 home runs in 2022. If he can pop 30 bombs, like he's gonna probably run into roughly that many. I don't
just
know,
by
just
accident,
just
just
by
by
accident,
accident.
right?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
if he just focuses on putting the bat on the ball and just basically gives up on chasing homers, which I don't even think he was doing, because that's not really been like, maybe in big moments he's wanted to be the hero, but if he just kind of gave up on the home run, which is not really what you want to do, and just ran into some, like maybe he just ends up being a really solid like 20, 25 home run, can pop 30 and can hit 300, and you walk away content given that you've salvaged basically what you thought was like a dead asset. Maybe not a dead asset, but certainly a declining one.
So I just looked up the average launch angle for him by month this year. So through March and April, average launch angle was 9 degrees, which is already a little low. And in May so far, it is 2 degrees.
He's so weird, man. What a weird career arc this guy's having. Could you imagine if in 2019 I went to you, so Vlad's about to basically finish runner up for MVP, then he's about to fall off a cliff, then he's going to turn into Luis Arias,
But better.
but better. Well, yeah, better. Just an insane turn of events for Vlad.
Yeah, it's funny. His hard hit rate this season is 58.3%.
That's got to be. Is that? I mean, it probably isn't a career high, but it's got to be.
It's a career high. Yeah.
Is it a career high? That's
Yeah.
what is going on with this guy. Literally, someone get somebody to like inside this brain. I need like an inside out, like
So
a full, like deep analysis of why this guy hits the way he does. It's so just mind-bendingly frustrating and nonsensical.
for him, hard hit rate, March and April, 53%. Hard hit rate in May, 73.3.
And his average launch angle is 2 degrees. What are we doing here, man?
It's so funny. I
He's
like
such a weird
I
player.
I don't even know like what you do. I mean the Teoscar stuff is super fun too, where it's like he's using Teoscar's bat too, and like had talks with Teoscar and like what do you think Teoscar told him? Teoscar was just like, hey man, stop trying to hit home run. Like I don't what even happens in that conversation? I don't
Who
know.
knows? Who even knows? Just a strange set of circumstances.
Yeah. Well, hopefully, I mean he's been very successful the past 2 weeks, so
You take it. You
hopefully
take it.
you take it.
You walk away. You take it, and you're content that he has figured something out. It seems.
Yes, he has like figured out a different approach, which is producing results, not like ideal results, but like still really good results, which you'll take.
You take it. You take it. You take what you can get from him. You take
Yes.
literally. You take it, and you bank on something else going right. And maybe he gets back to being a 130, 140 WRC plus guy. But like just anything you can get out of him is good with me.
Yeah. If he was a 130 WRC plus guy, like I think that's probably a win after the way this year started and the way that last year went. So let's move on because the Baltimore Orioles are next for the Toronto Blue Jays. And after last season, where the Blue Jays went 3-10 against the 100 win Orioles, how are you feeling about this series? Because the Orioles are once again atop the AL East. They're 26-13, and their fraud watch after like super being one of the best teams ever in clutch situations last year has appeared to not result in them falling off this year.
Yeah, it turns out when you have one of the greatest farm systems of basically the modern era of baseball, you're able to make up and then some for a little bit of good luck. Listen, this is not going to be a pretty series for the Blue Jays. I'm going to just put it straight. They're going to need Jose Barrios to look like he did for the first 7 starts of his season. And hopefully, also, he doesn't get very fortunate in terms of the lack of strikeouts, but the lack of punishing him, basically. They're going to need Chris Bassett to basically be almost perfect again. And they're going to need Yusei Kikuchi to be incredible because they are set to face Corbin Burns, who is Corbin Burns. They're set to face Kyle Bradish, who has an ERA under 2. And even like Cole Irvin, they get for game 3, has an ERA under 3. Like, this is not going to be an easy series. And we haven't even touched on, I mean, I didn't even mention Gunnar Henderson just being an absolute monster, as you had talked about before we recorded, and Adley Rutschman, and the list goes on. And oh my God, the Orioles are good again.
So I just pulled this up. So Fangraphs has this metric called clutch, which basically quantifies like how players perform in higher leverage situations compared to the rest of the league or whatever. And last year, the Baltimore Orioles had the second best clutch season of all time, which, lends itself to a lot of wins because if you overperform your general level of play in those clutch situations, it's going to result in a lot of wins, as it did a year ago. How terrifying is it that the Baltimore Orioles this season rank 19th in baseball with a negative clutch rating?
They did it. They built the Houston Astros again. The Houston, the meme where it's like such and such died on this date and such born on this date, and it's welcome back. Yeah, welcome back the Houston Astros, but they're in the Blue Jays division this time. Have fun.
Sorry, I was actually wrong. They ranked 21st in baseball.
Get out of here. Get out of here, brother. It's oh my God. Listen,
I
you
want to
take what
get
you
you.
can.
I was
Okay.
I was looking at
Go
this
ahead.
earlier. So like you're talking about the Astros dying, right? But so I'm just looking at Fangraphs playoff odds, and the Blue Jays are at 24.2% today. The Houston Astros are at 40%. And it's probably just that's probably just
Division.
division, right? Like yeah,
Division. But
like with
still, like, I mean, if the Houston Astros are dying on their deathbed, don't even want to know where the Blue Jays are right now.
yeah, we can maybe have that conversation a different day. I think there's a lot of the the blow it up talk going around right now, and I guess we kind of did have that last week. But I like I said, I don't think that they are going to blow everything up, even if they are out of contention come the trade deadline. And there's no chance that they start to move off assets before the trade deadline, in my opinion.
Here's what I'll say. Keep your ears peeled to this podcast when July rolls around, because if things go crazy, you're gonna want to be listening.
I love we do love trades here. We'll say that.
We do love
Um,
trades.
yeah. Anyways, Orioles this weekend or this week. Barrios, obviously, we knew that there was some regression coming for him, and we kind of saw that. So this Orioles team is just terrifying. I mean, Gunnar Henderson is like an MVP candidate and has been like if you want to talk about like guys getting lucky, he isn't getting lucky. Like he's playing almost in line with his expected stats. Jordan Westberg has been amazing. Colton Cowser's been amazing. Adley Rutschman just like is an amazing player. And what can you even say? Like Ryan O'Hearn and Ryan Mountcastle, I'm a little concerned about what might happen with them this week.
Yeah, we'll see how this week it goes. It's gonna be a tough series. We'll see if the Blue Jays can pull something out of a hat, but uh we'll see if there's an emergency pod on Thursday if things get so dire.
Hopefully not. Hopefully not. We can but before we go here real quick, Bob Nightingale today reports that the Baltimore Orioles are interested and basically monitoring Jordan Romano. Any thoughts on potentially dealing Jordan Romano? I feel like Jimmy Garcia would be more likely to get dealt in a situation like that, but any thoughts on the Orioles being interested in Romano?
Listen, I mean, tells you all the volatility that you need to know in terms of relievers. Craig Kimbrell was the best reliever in baseball for a minute there, and we spoke about him being the savior for them. And all of a sudden, he's crumbled to pieces, and now they're battling some injuries. And Yennier Cano doesn't have an ERA under 1 this season, and it's all of a sudden maybe the Orioles have a bullpen need. And look at that, the Blue Jays have a strong bullpen in theory, but in practice it hasn't been that good. But I mean, we'll see. There's probably a match there. I mean, trading Romano, I think, would be an enormous concession. I don't really see that as something, but again, it's only May, and there's still about 2 months to go until the trade deadline. A lot can change, and if things do change, Jordan Romano could be an enormous asset. And even Jimmy Garcia is still a really compelling asset for any team trying to add to their bullpen.
Absolutely. Yeah. I don't disagree with anything you said. And it would the Blue Jays, if they do decide to sell eventually, have probably the most attractive seller's profile of any team in the past 10 years, I would say.
Love to have that to look forward to. But I digress.
Well, hopefully we'll start to see kind of the I'm not even gonna say it. We said it too many times. There's a lot that you can hopefully have happen. And one of these days, maybe it will. One of these days, maybe it won't. But that's going to do it for us here today at the Bird's Eye View podcast. Make sure to drop a follow or review wherever you get your pods. Make sure you like and subscribe on YouTube. One final note, actually, before we go, this is around the time of our 1 year anniversary for us here on the pod. So if you stuck with us, if you listen to an episode, thank you so much for spending your time with us. Thank you so much for listening. We really appreciate it, and we've had a ton of fun through the first year on this pod, and it's just been a really great experience. And some of the feedback that we've gotten and having people listen to us is just insane for me, and I know Jori probably feels the same way. So thank you so much for that. You can follow us all on Twitter. The pod is at BEV_pod. I'm at Worden_Zach, and Jori is at J Negin-Shecter. Thanks so much, and enjoy the games this week.